So I feel like I'm participating in the weirdest PhD course that's ever existed at this point.
You are. You are.
I was thinking this the other day because I was looking at my bookshelf, and since we started this, I seem to have accumulated this bizarre series of books, like Beanie
Yeah.
Babies and
DeLorean.
DeLoreans and fairy
Right.
tales, and and now books related to the topic we'll be covering today. So
I
I don't
know.
know,
I
but I
do
love it.
I do feel like my internet search history is probably of concern to authorities, and especially after this month of the things that I've been looking up.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I've been red flagged this month.
But it's really great to see, how many of these things, not to like reference our own intro, but how they all kind of like pull from the same places, because obviously we're talking about a very specific time point in history. It's just really cool. Like, it's really interesting.
It is, yeah, there are so interrelations. Even in today's, we'll be pulling out various connections. So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
Dreamland for you.
Yes. Yes. And, speaking of that, welcome to Dreamland, everyone. My name is Melinda.
And I'm Conrad.
And today our watchword for this week was milk. I had some wonderful guesses. I'm going to go ahead and pop this guy up on the screen. We posted this in our social media that says milk with some beautiful splashing milk. And we had people guess, and K-Dog Broadcasting guessed, it's a comprehensive discussion on one of the most unheralded and potentially sexually incriminating fads of the late 20th century, the milk it does a body good, milk mustache ad campaigns with almost every celebrity of the time.
Yeah, I remember that. I think that was only a US phenomenon, though. I don't think it came over the
Really?
pond.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I feel like this could be just like crazy commercials, could be an entire Dreamland episode, honestly. And I have it. It's actually on my list of stuff to do at some point.
Yeah. I would love to show you some UK commercials.
I would love to see them. Sean Hambley similarly says famous TV mustaches. Now that's a great topic too, actually. I'm writing down all of these and stealing them from you guys. Wildstar Studio said breakfast cereals and their pop culture mascots. Do they have cereal mascots in the UK? He asks.
Yes, we do. Yes, I'm thinking of Tony the Tiger on Frosties,
We have
Kellogg's
those,
Frosties.
but we don't
Yeah.
call them Frosties.
Okay, what are they over there?
Frosted Flakes.
Oh, okay. Oh well, we made them sound even more childish.
Well, that's, to me, Frosted Flakes is one of those almost healthy cereals over here.
Almost.
I mean, compared to like Count Chocula, which was my favorite cereal growing up that I had
Yeah.
most every day. Because #healthy. And then Philip Rodriguez actually guessed the campaigns for missing children on 1980s milk cartons. So shout out to Philip. You did a great job guessing that. I don't think I would have guessed that. But yeah, that is what we're talking about. Not just that, but we're actually talking about 80s childhood safety propaganda. And included in that is the whole stranger danger. We all remember stranger danger here in the US. And so we're going to be talking about both sides of the pond, like what were the big concerns for kids' safety in each of our respective countries, and what did we as a culture do to try to help mitigate those things. So we're all really familiar. Actually, let me start here. This topic did come to me a while back because I was thinking about those do you know where your children are things. Like, I don't think, did you guys have that in your area?
I
Do you
don't
know?
remember it. No.
Okay, well, let me give you a little taste of what that was like.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
I told you last night, no!
I love it. No, that never happened in the UK. It sounds vaguely threatening.
It does.
It's like
Yeah.
there's a courier in the UK that sends you an email that says, "We have your parcel." And it's like, what are you going to do?
Yes. Well, so I was initially thinking about that and how it's like, wow, in the because that was kind of more, in my mind, that was more of a 70s thing. I think it was still happening through the 80s, but I didn't really do a lot of research on that because that immediately led me to the thought of, in the 80s, they just let us run wild. Like they didn't know where we were. We were just outside and they seemingly didn't care. It was just like, I'm sure they're fine. Like,
Yeah.
We're all really familiar with the memes of like, oh my God, when the streetlights come on, that's when you're supposed to go home. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Was that like that there too?
Yep, very much so. Yeah. When the
Okay.
street lights came on, you knew, ooh, that's it.
That's right. So we're all really familiar with that here. But in the 80s, at the same time, kids were starting to learn that they were really in danger. Like you're just constantly feeling the sense of being in danger.
You in danger, girl.
I mean, you're just all the time, but like you're still allowed to go outside and run around in the streets. So as opposed to keeping us locked in our homes, there were just all these strategies that like the adults in our lives put into place to enable us to make safer choices for ourselves, because it didn't occur to them that like they should just like lock us in a tower somewhere. It did have the added benefit of scaring the crap out of a lot of us. And then sometimes it just made us laugh, depending on how old we were. I mean, I guess, but so as I mentioned, the US and the UK did seem to have very different takes on the ways in which kids were in danger. So, I mean, what was it like there, Conrad? What is the background of safety propaganda over on your side of the pond?
Well, you'll not be surprised to hear that we nationalized it, as we do with most things. So many of the most influential and memorable public information campaigns in the UK that most Gen Xers will remember from that period were created by a government agency called the Central Office of Information, which sounds very Orwellian. It was formed on April Fool's Day.
So you're still waiting to see if it was a joke?
Apparently so, yeah. So it was formed in 1946 under Clement Attlee's Labour government. Now, is that not a British Prime Minister?
That is the most British person I've ever seen in my entire life.
He has a pipe and everything. I think it's great.
I feel like I should make some sort of do a British accent, but I'm not going to, because
I'm sure he had
unfriend
one.
me. You would, I know, but mine is bad. So you just be like, I'm offended, and just hang up.
No, he would have one of those English accents that cuts glass. So yeah, it was under the Labour government, which succeeded the Tory government that saw us through the war under Mr. Churchill, of course, and it replaced the Ministry of Information, which produced a wide range of propaganda, let's face it, that helped to maintain morale and create a common sense of purpose during the Second World War. But the government determined that a government-run ministry wouldn't be appropriate for a free democracy in peacetime, so it was transformed into a civil service, independent public relations agency. Despite that, it was criticised throughout its lifetime by the Conservative Party, which is the equivalent of the Republicans, because for some reason giving unvarnished facts to the public seemed to disturb them. I'm not entirely sure why.
Well,
But they never liked it. So when they were in power in 2011, they closed it down as part of many austerity measures to reduce public spending.
Yep.
But after it was formed, its immediate focus after the war was post-war recovery and improving public health, which led directly to the formation of the National Health Service here in the UK in 1948. And it continued to play a role in informing Brits about their health and health issues throughout its career, including, most memorably from my childhood, the world's first government-sponsored National AIDS Awareness Drive, if you can imagine that, which was launched in 1987 with a 40-second TV ad directed by Nicholas Roeg. That's the guy who freaked us out with Don't Look Now. Narrated by Aliens John Hurt. And it was a tombstone with the word AIDS etched into it, and the tagline, "Don't die of ignorance."
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was pretty impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it was until like 80. It was after this, I think, in the U.S. when we were really talking about it, because Reagan didn't like to talk about AIDS. Like, it was kept on the hush hush like for quite some time.
Yeah, so the British government were pretty proactive about it. They were very keen. They delivered a leaflet to every home that explained exactly what AIDS was, how it was transmitted, how to avoid infection, and crucially dispelling misinformation about it. So, no, you can't get it from kissing or sitting on a toilet seat and all that kind of thing.
Now, was it telling you that you needed to take your door and lean it in your front room and get underneath it?
No. Okay. Oddly enough, that was one thing that was not included in the AIDS campaign.
Okay.
But, yeah. And it was quite effective. It was credited with reducing the rate of infection, particularly among the gay community, which dropped towards the late 80s and the early 90s. So it actually did have an impact.
That's great.
Yeah. But they also covered many other subjects. So not just health, they also covered education, the benefits that were available to people from the welfare state, protecting the environment. And they even did road safety quite memorably in 1967, where they recruited a superhero.
Oh.
At the curb, stop. Look right, look left, look right again. If all's clear, walk quickly across. Remember, be smart, be safe. Always do your curb drill.
Is that actually... Is that actually Adam West?
It's Adam West himself as the Caped Crusader.
God bless him.
Yeah. Yep. He actually did come to the UK and teach children how to cross the road safely for 1967.
Well, it's funny because crossing the road there is different than here. You have to look the other way first.
Of course. Yeah.
True.
It is true. Yeah, it's very true. Of course, Cape Crusader was replaced in the mid-70s by a certain guy called David Prowse, who was the Green Cross Code man. He became slightly famous for a different role after that, I think.
Yes, he did.
I think I do have a slide of that somewhere. Yes, there he is. The Green Cross Code man, David Prowse.
For those who don't know, those one person who doesn't know, Dave Prowse was Darth Vader. He was the guy in the costume.
He was, yeah. He was a formidable statuesque figure, so that's why he was telling children to look right and left.
So why is it curb drill with a K?
That's how we spell it here. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
I literally was not prompted to ask you that. I was just ignorant.
There you go. Yeah, you curb a bad habit with the C, but the curb is with a K. There you go.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Learned something.
Yep. So the Central Office of Information was teaching children about all kinds of things. That's what I'll be focusing on today. Public information films, ostensibly designed to protect children, but many of them became iconic for my generation watching TV, because quite often they were nightmare fuel, quite frankly, and I'm thrilled to be sharing some of them with you today.
I can't wait to see these. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time.
So the first one, unfortunately, I can't actually show you a clip because I tested it and some nefarious organization has claimed copyright on it, which is ridiculous because it is a public information film and therefore in the public domain, but never mind. But I can describe it to you. It's called Lonely Water. It was from
really
1973.
amazing.
Yes. So it featured a hooded Grim Reaper figure who waited by rivers and lakes to claim the lives of unwary children.
Oh my
Voiced, if you can believe this, by none other than Dr. Loomis himself, Donald Pleasance. Can you imagine?
You Mayman. Yes, I can.
And he was doing it in his hushed tones. You know?
Oh, of course he was.
He can't be stopped. You know, he was doing that kind of thing. These stupid children.
I look at this and all I hear in my head is Stonehenge.
So during the course of Lonely Water, you got to see various children fall into the water and presumably drown off screen as this hooded figure looms in the background, describing the terrible mistakes they're making and the dangers that they're ignoring. It ends, thankfully, on a positive note, with a final scene in which two children rescue a drowning kid and thwart the Grim Reaper, who vanishes, leaving his robe behind, so presumably he's nude. I don't know what's going on there. And
He's
Donald
in
Pleasance,
the water waiting for the next kid.
Yes, to pull them down, yeah.
That's right.
And Donald Pleasance ends by taunting us with, "I'll be back," which is a finale that predates Arnold Schwarzenegger's line in The Terminator by more than a decade. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we know where we really got it from now, so.
Yeah. So that would be played during sort of 3 o'clock until 5 o'clock slot. So when you get home from school and you're watching cartoons and not doing your homework, you'd suddenly be confronted by children dying.
Well, what I think is funny about that is like you're sitting there watching cartoons and not going outside and playing by a river, because the kids who are playing by the river won't see the cartoon or won't see the ad, right? Like,
no, they're already a lost cause, clearly.
Yeah.
Now, for a connection to a previous Dreamland, this featured the late Terry Sue Pratt, who played the first child to appear on screen in Grange Hill, the subject of our first episode in this season.
Wow.
He's one of the children playing by the river. When interviewed, he said, "We all thought it was a lovely day out," he remembers. "We were told to jump around near the water, play with sticks and mess about. When I saw the finished film and saw a man in a black cape standing behind us, I had quite a different reaction." So there you go.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's delightful.
Shocking.
I love it.
Even more famous, perhaps, and certainly one that I remember more consistently, is a series of short films. There were 3 of them. They were called Play Safe. They weren't actually from the Central Office of Information. They were sponsored by the Electricity Council, and they were part of their Understanding Electricity campaign, which included many resources for schools explaining electricity and how we use it. But the only thing I think Gen Xers like myself in the UK will remember are the short films that were shown again during prime cartoon time, depicting children with kites, frisbees, fishing rods, coming to quite literally shocking ends. It was, they were really quite terrifying. So I'm going to show you a lovely clip from one of those segments.
Go on, get it. We're not supposed to go in there. Oh, go on, there's a gap down there. A gang of kids broke in yesterday. I saw them.
Quick, grease him up.
That little wood.
I thought she was going to hit him in the... Okay, so he's going to slip through the bars.
He is.
Yeah.
Into an electrical substation where his frisbee has landed.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like on one of the things. Like it is. Oh my god. Oh my god, no! No!
Poor boy.
It would never have happened if he'd kept out.
Or if he'd been playing somewhere safe.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or if he had parents who loved him. Oh my God.
Yeah. So Jimmy bursts into flames.
That girl's gonna need therapy for the rest of her life. Like,
Yes.
she's definitely, she's like the girl from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the end, driving away, and you're just like, there's no therapy that's enough therapy. You know what I mean?
Yep, it's the 1,000-mile stare for the rest of her life, I think. Just endlessly seeing Jimmy's legs on fire. The other three were not better than that, but that one is the one that I always remember. The Frisbee Kid bursting into flames. Poor Jimmy. One of the reasons I can't help but notice that that is so effective is because of the music score, which sounds like it's, you know, a public information film scored by Goblin, who did synthesizer work for Dario Argento Giallo slasher movies.
Yes.
It's composed.
Is it them, or does it just sound like them?
It just sounds like them. It's actually composed by a Scottish composer. His name was Harry Robertson, but he was often credited as Robinson, and he had a fruitful career with Hammer Film Productions, composing the scores for such films as The Vampire Lovers in 1971, Legend of the Werewolf in 1975, and he also wrote the music for Hawk the Slayer, for any cheesy 80s fantasy film fans out there. So, yeah, that's why the music is so good. And I always remember it. As soon as I hear that plonky, 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 I think, Jimmy!
Jimmy, no!
Poor Jimmy.
Oh,
poor Jimmy.
Poor Jimmy.
Yeah.
So it seems like British kids were just like really in danger from just the world, like the literal world around them.
Yeah, that was very much the concern at the time. So according to the Guardian newspaper, who did a sort of a retrospective on all these films recently, they were saying that accidental child deaths were on the rise in the 1970s, and the government felt under pressure to shock people out of complacency. And Terry Sue Patt, who I mentioned earlier, who appeared in one of them, said people forget how different children's lives were back then. There were no computer games, 3 TV channels, and kids lived outdoors. Entertainment was going on adventures, finding excitement in odd places like, you know, rivers and such, substations. Yeah, and also you have to remember there was a lot of post-war reconstruction, so there was a lot of damaged buildings and building sites and unexploded bombs. So
yeah, that is totally a good point that we definitely wouldn't have over here.
Yeah, there was a lot of wreckage still to clear up, and it was hanging around for decades. I mean, as far as the drowning is concerned, it's very difficult to find figures, which we'll talk about in more detail later, but yeah, it seems as though from recent figures, it's not quite as prevalent as you might think, but oh boy, is there a huge gender difference.
What are you guys doing?
I don't know what it is. So 81% of deaths in freshwater are men.
What about saltwater?
I don't know. Maybe that's your domain.
Women live in the sea, and they die in the sea as well.
Apparently so. But yeah, guys, be careful around lakes and rivers, because it's just a potential death trap, apparently, looking at these figures. It's quite shocking.
Well, so Conrad, were you constantly falling in rivers and swinging from electrical cables and stuff like that? Or like, what, did you know anyone that anything like this happened to? Or like, was this just something you heard about on TV?
This is just something I heard about on TV. I mean, I was never going into an electrical substation after what happened to Jimmy. Never.
So it worked, is what you're saying.
It absolutely worked, yeah. And I never used to be one for jumping into rivers to go fishing or anything like that.
I don't think you jump into a river to fish. That might be the reason why you're not.
No, that's probably very true.
You don't catch them with your hand.
No. Or teeth.
Like a bear.
No, No, but that wasn't one of my my childhood activities. But I will say it is true of what Terry Sue Pat said and what you were alluding to earlier, which is we did used to just, parents just used to throw you out of the house.
Oh my God, yes.
9 o'clock on a Saturday, and you were just expected to come back for lunch and when the street lights came on.
Yep.
So my brother and I were always out on bicycles, and there were a lot of building sites near us, just as Terry Sue Pat said, and we would build camps on them, and we would sort of dig tunnels and all kinds of stuff that was clearly potentially lethal.
Mm-hmm.
But you just didn't think about it back then, and we somehow seemed to get by.
Yeah, somehow we all survived the 80s, but it's crazy.
Yeah,
well,
not Jimmy.
Good point. Well, so over here in the U.S., we had, similarly to your, Ministry of Propaganda or whatever it was called, we had the Ad Council. So
Okay.
It was initially during World War II. It was called the War Advertising Council. For obvious reasons. And it's a nonprofit that makes PSAs for both government and non-government sponsors. They changed the name in 1946 just to the Ad Council and shifted its focus to issues such as atomic weapons, world trade, religious tolerance. They also partnered with the Safety Council. And in the 50s, they made these anti-communism ads. They eventually, during the 80s, made all of the Just Say No campaign commercials that were Nancy Reagan's whole shtick. Now we won't just so you guys know, we're not going to be talking about drug PSAs, because when we get into the US, I think we can all agree that was the primary thing that we saw over here were drug PSAs. There were a bazillion of them. They are hilarious, and it's a whole other show. But
Wow.
So just know you're not going to see any of those here today, but there's plenty of other insanity. In the 80s, they, along with several other groups, gave us treasures such as these.
It's called the forest, but every year we start forest fires. A careless match or cigarette and poof, fire. So the next time you're in the forest, be extra careful, okay?
If you knew it was me, would you have listened? Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
Yeah, fine. You sure? Relax. What's a few beers?
If you don't stop your friend from drinking and driving, you're as good as dead.
Oh my.
Drinking and driving can kill a friendship.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so the first one that we saw there was with Smokey the bear. He always does all of the don't start forest fires things. That was Joanna Cassidy. She's the sexy snake lady from Blade Runner. I'm sure you recognized her. The terrifying thing about that is like when she basically pulls off her face and you see it when you see it like crumble up, and underneath her she's like a guy in a bear costume.
Yeah, and for some reason she seems to be unable to move her lips, as though she's Botoxed her entire face.
Yeah, and that was from 1973, so it was definitely pre-Botox. But I heard that they eventually in the 80s re-edited that so that it didn't show the face crumbling part, which is the terrifying part of it, right? Like it's
deeply disturbing.
And then in 1971 was the next one, so we'll go back a couple years, and it's the Keep America Beautiful campaign, and they have it's called the Crying Indian ad, okay, and the guy is played by Iron Eyes Cody, who is not Native American. He's actually Italian, but he went to great lengths at the time to hide that fact and had this whole backstory where a lot of people believed that he was actually Native American. But earlier this year, they actually announced that they were going to be retiring the Crying Indian ad finally, and transferring the rights to the National Congress of American Indians Fund because it's kind of crappy. They were kind of doing that thing where they were using Indian, Native American people, you know, like as a sort of appeal to people like, oh, we need to be more environmentally friendly or whatever. And then in 1983 was the final one. It was kids listening to the Beat It song by Michael Jackson, getting in a car, drinking and driving. And then they all just turn into skeletons. You know how you do.
Yeah.
So those are just some examples. I know the drinking and driving one is in the drug milieu, but we're going to leave that behind because the biggest safety focus in the U.S., aside from drugs, was stranger danger. Stranger danger was something that we heard about pretty regularly in a lot of different ways. It's believed that the term originated in 1963 in the Austin Daily Herald. There was a quote that was about, you know, stranger danger, which was like some sort of, they were going to be showing some sort of film that or it was a picture that they said the stranger danger picture, in parentheses, child molestation warning picture for elementary students. So there was some concern starting in the 60s. But fears about child, all of the kind of child abduction stuff really picked up steam in the 70s. And this was driven in large part by a number of very notable abduction and murder cases of children. I don't have time to talk about all of these kids, and it's a tragedy what happened to all of these kids, but I do want to let you guys know because some of these really influenced their parents were so made into activists by what happened to their kids that so Stephen Stainer was the first one in this picture. He was kidnapped in 1972 at age 7, but he escaped his kidnapper and at age 14 in 1979. And there's a really cool movie on Hulu called Captive Audience, a real American horror story that kind of goes through the insanity that was the whole story of Stephen Stainer.
Wow.
Then in 1979, the same year that he comes back, and that was all over the media, this 6-year-old Eton Patz up in Soho in New York disappeared on his very short walk from his house or apartment to the bus stop. And May 25th is designated National Missing Children's Day in the United States even now, due to like Eton Patz. Adam Walsh is the one right in the center. I'm sure almost every single one of us Americans knows who Adam Walsh is. He was a 6-year-old kidnapped from a Sears store in Florida. His head was found in a drainage canal 2 weeks later. His father is John Walsh, who hosted America's Most Wanted and has done a bunch of other activism about this topic. In fact, I'd say John Walsh is one of the big drivers of a lot of the laws that came out surrounding missing and exploited children. Johnny Gosch and Eugene Martin, who are there on the top, they were aged 12 and 13 respectively. They were paper boys that were abducted in Iowa and never found. And they are the 2 boys who instigated the Missing Children Milk Carton Program, which is the title of our episode, you know, the milk title. Jacob Wetterling was he was assaulted with 3 of his friends and then abducted by a man in a mask while he was riding his bike home from the video rental store in Minnesota. And that led to the Jacob Wetterling Crimes Against Children and Sexually Violent Offender Registration Act, which basically requires states to implement a registry of sex offenders and crimes against children. So I'm saying all of this to point out, like, these things that are in place here tie back to very specific cases. Like Polly Klaas, a guy literally broke in with a knife and kidnapped her out of a slumber party inside of her house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was in Petaluma, California in 1993. And then, so there's a foundation named for her. Megan Kanka, people have probably heard of Megan's Law, which requires disclosure of details relating to the location of registered sex offenders. She was taken by her neighbor, actually. And then Amber Hagerman in 1996 was abducted as a 9-year-old in Texas. And that was the origin of the Amber Alerts that we're all... I don't think you guys have them over there, but they definitely...
No, but I've heard of them.
Yeah. And then what doesn't usually get mentioned is the Atlanta child murders, and there were 30 people, up to 30 people. The numbers vary with who gets lumped into this, but there were 24 kids and 6 adults within a 2-year span here in Atlanta that went missing or were found murdered. There's a great series on HBO called Atlanta's Missing and Murdered: The Lost Children, which goes into great detail about what happened to mostly men and boys, but there were a couple of girls in there as well. And then prior to the 80s, just so you know, child kidnapping and or murder was generally treated as a local story by news media. And law enforcement was woefully unprepared to investigate or quickly escalate these cases. So there were exceptions to these amazing cases like the Lindbergh baby and stuff like that. But in general, if your child went missing or something like that and you went to the cops, they would kind of blow you off a little bit a lot of times. They would, say, well, we have to wait the 48 hours. And it's like, he's 6. Like he didn't just go
48 hours.
Yeah. And it varied by state, right? So
okay.
Often children were treated no different from adults from the cops' perspective. And parents, they would have to wait that time period. And that's problematic because according to the FBI, half of all kids who are taken and murdered are killed within an hour of the abduction occurring. Within 3 hours, that number jumps to 76%. And after 24 hours, it jumps to nearly 90%. So we're going to talk more about stats later. But often these missing kids' parents had to form their own search parties and made up of friends or whoever they could find that would help them look. Like they would form the big chains and walk through woods or walk through drainage ditch areas or whatever was near where the kid went missing. The parents often also had to make their own missing children posters. So here's the ones made by the families of Eaton Patz and Adam Walsh. So they had to really, muster their own resources. And I mean, this is the early 80s. So people just didn't have good printers at home that they could just like quickly whip up a missing kid's poster. Honestly, the cops would say stuff like, well, we've just never done that before. Like we don't know anything about how to do it because they just didn't do it. In some cases, police were shockingly rude and dismissive of the parents by the accounts of those parents. So there's a great documentary also on HBO called The Texas Killing Fields. This also spans this time period. And it was a bunch of different girls and women who went missing and their bodies were found in this field, just thrown away like trash. And the father of one of those girls was so enraged, like so many of these parents who have become activists in their own rights. He started his own company called EquiSearch. He is still he's still alive today, and he's still very angry and adamant and helps other families who go through this. So, I mean, this process of them not having anything in place really turned these parents into like, we're going to change the laws. And so what did we as a culture do about this? Well, we started with like milk cartons. So when the second Iowa paperboy Eugene Martin went missing, a relative who worked at a local Des Moines Anderson dairy, boy, that is hard to say, he thought of getting both boys' photos out there. So in September of 1984, they replaced an ad because they used to put ads on the side of milk cartons because it was just free ad space. He was like, let's put this missing photo of these local kids because it was a local dairy, right? And maybe it'll like help spread the word. So the concept then spread like wildfire. Everybody thought it was such an ingenious idea. And so soon there were missing kids photos on milk cartons across the United States. There were like the Missing Children Milk Carton Program was initiated and coordinated by the National Child Safety Council in the 80s, and it remains the Safety Council's most well-known program. So I pulled a couple of fun clips from movie and TV just to sort of give you a taste, so to speak, of the milk carton program.
Keeping the refrigerator doors wide open. Are we just trying to refrigerate the whole neighborhood? You know, it's not fair. I would like to have a personal life, too. Where's Michael?
He went to bed early, Mom.
What's the matter, Vicky? This is your picture on the milk carton. What? This is your picture on the milk carton. You're a missing child. No, I'm not. I'm right here. You may be right here, but you're missing. Oh, no. It is me. Why am I in a milk carton?
Wow.
So we all know the Lost Boys, and there are tons of references to this whole culture of stranger danger. It's even there in the title of the movie, right? And you can even see Laddie. I think the first couple times I watched the movie, that went right by me. But Laddie, who is the little boy in the Lost Boys group, is right there on the milk carton. The movie could not have made it clearer. I'm just really dense sometimes. But the second clip, I saw you looked really confused. So have you ever heard of a TV show called Small Wonder?
Not at all, no.
Okay. So Small Wonder, the gist of that TV show was that she was a robot.
Oh, okay. That explains the speech patterns.
That's right. The little girl is really a robot. And so she would just say things very matter-of-factly like other kids would not. And so that whole scene is funny because there was an actual like ABC after-school special or a TV movie or something called The Girl on the Milk Carton, which was about a girl who saw her own picture in a grocery store on a milk carton and realized that her father had kidnapped her. And like, I think it's based on a real story. I couldn't find a lot of details, so it may not really be. It may have just been like a TV movie that was made up. So I couldn't really figure out what was the truth on that. But so anyway, aside from the milk cartons, what else did we do? Well, we did fingerprinting of children. They would go around different groups, sometimes the police, sometimes parents advocacy groups and stuff like that, would go and do sometimes hair things and like draw blood and do all this different stuff, fingerprint, and make a little kit. And the parents were told, this slide is from February 22nd, 1983 in the New York Times. And it says, quote, "Thousands of children in more than a dozen states around the country are being fingerprinted voluntarily as a means of identifying them if they are reported missing." It later did bring up all kinds of privacy issues because and we'll get to this a little more later, but they were actually cataloging some of that stuff and just kind of keeping it on file, even though they said they weren't. And they were saying they were giving the parents the full kit so that the parents could take it in if their kid ever went missing. It's problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I don't suppose that were they keeping them on an equal basis regardless of the children's background, or were there
I don't know, but
demographic
the majority
trends in there?
of the ones that were kept were not this kid in the photo. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So there was even a board game about strangers.
Oh.
It's called Strangers and Dangers. It looks like so much fun to play, you guys. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it says something like, played with an electrical wire? You must not go back to whatever square. So Conrad, you would have done great at this game because you already knew not to play with electrical wires.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So we also, of course, started having more Stranger Danger PSAs. So I do have an example of that. So let's watch, shall we?
For the last time. I'm McGruff, the crime dog. Let me show you something. See that playground? A lot of kids there. Every day in this country, 60 kids disappear.
Oh.
Some run away, but a lot are kidnapped by strangers or even by people they know. Almost 20,000 kids a year. 20,000 kids, one kid at a time. Maybe your kid, on your street, just like Jenny.
Oh, poor Jenny.
She and Johnny are just right there together, right? She's an idiot. I think it started a little late, but the gist is she walks by the car and she looks inside and, yeah. So we saw stuff like that and it was, not great. But probably the most common way we saw PSAs was, like you said, after school. You come home and what do? You watch cartoons, right? So we would get those fun little morals at the end of many cartoons. So let's watch a few of those.
Hey, your parents were in an accident. Get in, I'll take you to them.
Don't go. I guess I shouldn't.
Jen, who was that?
I don't know. She said Vicky's parents were in an accident.
Your parents are safe at home. Never listen to a stranger. Ask an adult you know and trust, a teacher or a relative.
I'm glad I did the right thing.
Doing the right thing makes you a superstar.
Hey, look, Dad. Champ's hitchhiking. But he'll get to the soccer field way before us.
Maybe, but maybe not. Hitchhiking is dangerous. You never know who's going to pick you up. The person who picks him up could be a venom agent, or worse, a child molester.
Hey, Jeff! How about walking to the game with us? Dad, when it comes to hitchhiking, I say thumbs down.
There's just a lot there, you know. It's, you know, first we start off with Jem, and you know, there was 2 G.I. Joe clips and a Mask clip. And Mask, the guy, I can never think of his name, but the dad in Mask is always just got the weirdest affect of any character. And he's always just like, you know, when the kid says, oh, well, he's going to get there faster than us, and he goes, maybe not. It kind of seemed like he was just going to wait and see. Like, he kind of seemed like he wasn't going to call that kid over. He was just like, kids, let's see, and you know what happens.
I never liked him much. Let's see what happens. Yeah.
Right.
Could be an agent of venom, or worse, a child molester. Wow. Okay.
But probably the most surreal thing that I've ever seen is this video from the early 90s or mid 90s, 1995. And this is kind of a crazy clip, but I feel like I have to share it with you. It's from a video called Get Street Smart, A Kid's Guide to Stranger Dangers. So here we go.
Who needs it? A smile goes a mile, you know.
Hi. Hey, where are you going? On your way to school?
See? He likes me. Hello.
Interesting boy. Where do you come from?
That yellow house over there.
Is he flirting?
Yeah.
You never give out personal
Did you come
information
here
to
often?
a stranger. Do you know that guy?
No, but he has a friendly smile.
Yeah, and now he knows your address too.
Gotta get home. Gotta get home.
Hey, Corny, where are you going?
No.
Hey, talk to me for a while. Maybe we can get some ice cream.
I don't know.
Well, here, maybe this gum will make you feel better.
Thanks. No.
Okay, we'll see you later, Corny.
Gotta get home. I thought I told you to come back later.
Corny, open the door, Corny.
Oh.
No. Stop. Think. Listen to your heart.
Oh.
What would you do?
What would you do?
Oh, hi.
Oh my goodness.
And it goes downhill from there. He literally pulls him out, and he's just like dragging him into a car in the middle of the driveway, and then the police tear up. It's just crazy. So that clip I was not aware of. It came from the 90s, and I saw it in Best of the Worst, Wheel of the Worst 13. So if you're a Red Letter Media fan, then you can go and watch their video about that. But I had to show that because it's such a crazy. You've basically got this guy in a costume. He looks like a sea monkey, doesn't he? Like
Yeah.
He looks like, I don't even know. He's supposed to be an alien.
Okay.
His name is Corny. He fights off repeated attempts at abduction and molestation. Apparently, everybody in this town wants to molest him. I mean, they must think he's super hot. I don't get it, but I mean, he looks like
bright red.
Yeah,
yeah, it does. He looks like a lobster or something. I don't know what's going on there.
There's a great line in that movie. It's like a 25-30 minute long movie, but they say somewhere in there are so many ways to kidnap kids.
Let me count the ways.
Yeah. So anyway, all of this constituted a moral panic, and we've heard about moral panics before. When we talked about like satanic cults with Satanic Panic, concerns over music lyrics and stuff like that, people who were freaking out about D&D, all that kind of stuff. This is the stranger danger thing it's a term coined in 1967. It basically is defined as a widespread fear that's often irrational that some evil person or thing threatens the values, interests, or well-being of a community or society. And so while these things were happening, were they happening at the rate at which all of these things are telling us? And that's the question. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, Melinda, did you personally have any brushes with strangers offering you sweets and inviting you into cars at any point in your life?
Well, I did. Actually, I did. I was riding bikes with my friend Brian, and we were like riding down the street, and this late model sedan pulls up with a man and a woman in it. And they're like asking for directions. And I immediately was like, no. And I took off, which probably looked crazy to them, but I took off. But
Screaming,
then again,
or?
well, kind of, I was like, run, run. I was yelling at my friend to run. And she's just kind of a dumbass. And she just like, we were walking our bikes, you know, we weren't riding them, but we were walking them. And she just walks her bike up to the car. And I'm like, run, what are you doing? And I take off through the bushes where they can't follow me in the car. And I ride home, and I get home, and I'm like, Mom, I'm thinking that I have fulfilled my child duty. Like, all these things have told us to, like, tell an adult and do all this stuff. And I'm doing exactly what I was told. And my mom just looks at me, and she's like, oh, Melinda.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, but Mom, she could be dead now. And my mom's like, you know, because I was a very, like, imaginative, excitable child, and I guess she probably just thought I was, you know, being Melinda. But I asked her about it. She doesn't remember it, but she was just like, I mean, I probably said, you know, was she okay, you know? And I'm like, I don't remember it that way. But anyway.
Did you ever see your friend again?
Yeah, she survived. I feel like me running away screaming, if they were trying to kidnap her, probably gave them pause, because they figured I was probably going to go tell an adult. And I'd seen their car, and I was like making a mental note of like the color and the, you know, all the stuff.
Yeah.
My dad used to run drills with me about this stuff.
Really? Drills? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, we would walk into a fast food place and sit down, and then he would say, now close your eyes. And I'd close my eyes, and he'd say, okay, what's the person behind you wearing?
Wow.
Where's the exit door? You know, those kinds of things.
Okay. Oh, I thought you meant that he was, you know, timing how fast you can run screaming from a car.
No, he wanted me to like be able to be aware of my surroundings. So it's sort of like he was prepping me to be in the Bourne Identity or something. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's useful, I guess.
Yeah. I still do
it. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's going to be ingrained in you now. It's never going to change, is it? No.
Anyway.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, so did you guys have stranger danger at all over there? Like,
we did, yes. I mean, it was mixed in with everything else. I don't feel as though it received sort of a disproportionate amount of attention in the same way that I'm getting a sense it did in the US. I mean, I'm hearing that it's sort of 90% drugs, 8%...
Maybe 70, maybe 70% drugs and 30% stranger danger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas we're all about setting Jimmy's legs on fire over here. But we did have stranger danger too. Again, I had another wonderful clip that I was going to show you that's going to be in the after show for patrons, because again, it's been copyright claimed despite being public domain, but never mind. It was called Never Go With Strangers from 1971, and yeah, there we go. And it was produced by the Central Office of Information. It was intended. Yeah, some of the imagery is pretty disturbing.
What is that in the lower right? Oh my God, that's nightmare.
Yes, exactly. At one point during it, a stranger that's attempting to lure away a child, his face is replaced by an identikit artist impression instead, so that you can sort of see how you're going to see that face again after the crime has been committed.
I don't like that.
It's not nice, no. It's pretty disturbing. And this was intended to be shown to children aged 7 to 10, but it was supposed to be screened to them under adult supervision because of the distressing nature of its content. The full 18-minute version, which we'll be watching together in our Patreon exclusive after show, includes some incredibly disturbing imagery, including a child cowering in the corner of their abductor's home with a shadow advancing toward and looming over her.
Oh my God. Is this like the nuclear war episode that we did where the Brits just do it, like when they do, it is like the most terrifying thing you've ever seen in your life?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you've got some surprises coming to you.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't pull our punches. We don't pull our punches. I noted with interest that the film begins recounting fairy tales. So, harkening back to our previous episode, so it's all of those cautionary tales, Hansel and Gretel, Red Riding Hood, and curiously Aladdin as well, because of a nefarious uncle. So,
yeah, yep.
Yeah. So
although, are they saying that he was like, you know?
No, they don't go quite that far.
Okay.
You'll be able to see when you watch the full thing exactly the comparison and the contrast that they make, and the beautiful language that they use in describing the motivations of the people who are approaching you. Yeah.
Okay.
So it draws a comparison between those antagonists and the banal face of evil in everyday life, which is the guy with the mustache that you can see in the bottom left.
Yeah, he looks like the guy from the G.I. Joe PSA that was the good guy. He just needs the glasses. But.
He just needs to know. Here, he's not a very nice guy, and he talks to the little girl with the finger on her face, where it pauses and asks you, "What would you do?
Yeah.
What would you do?" Because she's thinking about it. Yeah, he talks to her like, "Hello, little lady." I don't know why, but he's using that sort of voice. "Hello, little lady."
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh, God. You're gonna love it.
I think so.
But it was deeply disturbing. But again, by far there was a much more famous and iconic Stranger Danger promo that was shown on television. This Never Go with Strangers was not shown on television, but the one that was very famous. It was called Charlie Says. It was part of a series in which a young boy and his cat teach children lessons about the dangers of, matches and all kinds of things, but among them was Stranger Danger. So here is that special for you.
Charlie and I were in the park.
Oh my God.
This man came up and said, "Would I like to see some puppies?" And I said yes. And I was going to go, but Charlie stopped me. Charlie's reminded me, my mum says I shouldn't go off with people I don't know. Then the man went away.
Probably freaked out by the cat.
We went and told Mummy, and she said we'd been very good. I got an apple and Charlie got something he likes.
What is wrong with this cat?
He says never go anywhere with men or ladies you don't know.
Yeah, or ladies.
Yeah, well, I feel like this reminds me of The Wall. Like the trippy, drugged out acid sequences in The Wall. Anyway.
Right, yeah. So it was a series of 6 PSAs animated for the COI by an animator called Richard Taylor, who was also famous for doing a series called Crystal Tips and Alistair before my time. I don't know it, but maybe some of our listeners have seen that one. It's much lighter in tone and more fondly remembered. It was voted Britain's favourite PSA in a BBC poll held in 2006 in honour of the 60th anniversary of the COI. Mm-hmm. The British Film Institute claims that the Prodigy frontman Liam Howlett was unsuccessfly sued for the use of a sample from this. Amazingly,
wow!
In their debut single Charlie, which reached number 3 in the UK singles chart in 1991.
Was it the cat having a stroke?
Partly, yeah.
Really?
But also the kid speaking, saying, your mummy should know where you are. Mummy should know was the one that they sampled from.
Okay.
Charlie the cat was voiced by popular British DJ and comedian Kenny Everett. I didn't realize that. I only realized that when I researched this. Maybe I should have known. But yeah, Charlie is Kenny Everett. I never knew.
Okay.
The animator Taylor revealed in 2006 that the previously unnamed boy is actually called Dominic, after the son of his neighbor, who stepped in to voice the child after the professional acting kid's reading was deemed too American. There you go.
God forbid.
God forbid. The aforementioned 2006 poll also featured PSAs by children's entertainers Rolf Harris and Jimmy Savile, which does not age well because both of them were implicated in historical child abuse scandals covered by the Metropolitan Police's Operation U-Tree investigation in 2013.
Yikes.
Rolf Harris was found guilty of all charges and imprisoned. Jimmy Savile had died by the time they conducted this investigation. Anyway, in either case, the poll has not aged well.
Wow. Well, it's funny that you say that. I have a clip that I'll be showing you in the after show that has a similar thing where it's like unfortunate in like a certain celebrity being included in it that probably shouldn't have, and it just feels very prophetic. I'll just put it that way.
Okay. Interesting.
So I have to ask you, did you ever have any experience with anything that was remotely related to like abduction or stranger danger type stuff yourself? Or was that like the whole other thing where you never really experienced it?
Well, I do have some experience of this. So when I was in primary school in Dorset, we did have some instances around our school of somebody offering children sweets, which is a bit of a classic. I'm not sure exactly what happened to the kids, if there were any that were actually taken, if it was successful, but the alarm was raised at school and we were informed that we should be wary of any strangers at the school gates offering sweets and trying to lure you away from the school. And so I asked my mum why. What's the stranger going to do? I don't understand. Now, my mother has always believed in telling kids the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So she told me exactly what the stranger was going to do to me if I went with them, in terms of sexual assault. I particularly remember it because she asked me, she'd already had the birds and bees chat with me, so I sort of knew the mechanics of what happened between men and women, but I was trying to imagine what would happen between two men. My first guess was that it involved your belly button.
Well, it could.
Possibly, yeah. But yeah, I was obviously working with my own dimensions at that point. But anyway, I was quickly corrected, and I was quite shocked when I found out exactly what was going to happen to me. And I couldn't wait to get to school and tell all my friends. Shortly afterwards, my mother received a phone call from school.
Oh my God.
She was called in and she was given quite a severe telling off by the headmaster because there have been numerous complaints about me telling the kids about how they were going to be sodomized by a stranger.
Well done. You were like your own stranger danger activist at the time.
Well, I don't think anybody was going to go with that guy at this point, I think.
I don't think so, but
Job done.
Certainly not after you made it clear what he was after.
Exactly. Well, I don't believe in all these euphemisms.
No.
To be honest.
Well, good for your mom for just being honest with you. I feel like my mom would have done the same thing, but the only thing that I have that's comparable to that is when I was a kid, I went to school and when I found out there was no Santa, I told every kid in the class.
Yeah,
because I was pissed. I was like, "You lied to me! They're lying to you!" I was screaming on the schoolyard ground
as you took pot shots from a bell tower. No,
I was like standing on top of the jungle gym. They're lying to you, and you just believe it. My mom was like, Yeah, I'm not surprised she did that.
Oh, bless you.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my experience of stranger danger in the UK. But it was genuinely a thing the government was responding to. Again, as you said in your example, some very high profile cases. I think the one that's probably most famous here, I don't know if it's found its way across the pond, is the Moors murders, which were conducted by, unusually, which is probably why the British PSAs, I don't know if the American ones did, they always said a man or woman, if a man or woman approaches you.
I think they'd mostly said men, but they would also say anyone. Like, just be scared of everyone, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley abducted, assaulted and murdered 5 children between 1963 and 1965, and that was just a massive scandal at the time.
Yeah, I've heard about this just because I'm a true crime junkie person. But yeah, it's a terrible story.
It is, yeah. So the government's Stranger Danger campaign started in 1971 at a time when only 33 child abductions were recorded, including cases not involving strangers. In 2015, there were about 618 non-parental abductions, according to Action Against Abduction. However, the charities warned against interpreting the jump since the 70s as a real increase, explaining that it's mainly down to reporting processes, that, more cases are being brought to people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
But still, that's 600 out of about 12 million kids aged between 0 and 15 in 2015, according to the census of that year. So that's 0.005% or 1 in 20,000 children. So it's not exactly rife here. And I feel like any cases where an abduction is successful and somebody actually does go missing, it is quickly a national news item. It's on the BBC News and everybody knows about it and everybody's supposed to be looking. So we don't quite have the Amber Alerts, but everybody is aware if police are concerned about the whereabouts of an individual.
Mm-hmm.
A study of 2011-2012 figures suggests that only 44% of the 592 cases recorded in the UK during that financial year were perpetrated by strangers, and only a quarter of those were successful. Which,
that's still a lot, actually.
It is still a lot. I mean, any is too many, but still, it's not a massive number of cases, thankfully. Few of those had a clear sexual motive. Even fewer still resulted in any kind of assault, single digits, and there were no homicides recorded. So this is great news, but it does make you wonder whether the campaign is working, or does it mean that actually it's not as much of a problem, maybe, as they're making out, or it's not entirely justified. So that sort of harkens back to the moral panic that you were referring to before.
Right.
There is generally a lack of data. It's very hard to find data on these figures. The Australian paediatrician John Pern, in an article published in the Journal of Pediatrics and Child Health in 1981, noted that it's very easy to get funding for an educational campaign, but very difficult to get funding into research into how effective those campaigns actually are.
Yes.
So
it is very hard.
So there's his quote. I found great difficulty in obtaining money for accidental research, but but little difficulty in funding promotional accident prevention campaigns. A difficulty of balancing the costs of preventive programs against the costs of the accidents themselves is that we have almost no data for specific accidents.
Right.
So yeah, it all seems as though it could be more of a sort of a general anecdotal feeling that incidents were on the rise rather than any actual measurable trend.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I have some slides on that as well later to look at what is the data, what does it say, but as we're talking about that, we talked about, like you said, that it's moral panic. So even though it is a moral panic, all these things were the question is, were they actually helpful in protecting kids? Like, you know, like you said, even one kid, if it's your kid, you know, it's a big deal to you, which is totally understandable, right? Like, no one's denying that. But so the risks are almost universally overstated in the media. This article that's from the journal Public Interest, which I don't love the article, but the author himself, Jay Best, is a sociologist and seems to know his stuff pretty well. And this article states, although the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children revised its estimates of stranger abductions to 4,000 to 20,000 per year, the earlier figure of 50,000 continues to be widely quoted. I think we heard that in my my McGruff clip earlier. That figure was being examined critically by the media and others all the way back in 1985. So, you know, it's and I'll show you when I get to my data slides where those numbers actually come from. But when you're talking about stranger abductions, which are sort of that classic, hey, little girl, get in the car, I've got candy, those types of scenarios are very few and far between and very rare. And really, the numbers of those haven't changed since the 80s. So focusing on strangers, the problem with doing that is that it distracts from the real danger of and teaching kids how and when to speak up because as we probably all know here, if you're going to have a kid who's being sexually abused or abused in various different ways, it's most likely going to be someone in the family, or at the very least someone they know, a teacher, clergy member, somebody that they know. And it teaches them to fear strangers. So like anybody that's different than them is bad and scary. So that's not a great seed to plant in a child's brain either. The fingerprinting thing, parents have expressed, like I mentioned earlier, concerns that law enforcement was keeping children's fingerprints despite saying that they didn't. So this news article is called "The NYPD Kept an Illegal Database of Juvenile Fingerprints for Years." Now, this particular article is talking not just about these fingerprinting kits, but kids who are in custody battles or in other types of scenarios get fingerprinted for different reasons. And that's where these fingerprints come from. But nonetheless, the police, once they get access to things like fingerprints, they probably want to keep them. So you just want to be careful with that. And then there's no clear data on how or if that fingerprinting has helped find missing children. So it's interesting. My mom, when I talked to her about this, she was like, yeah, you know, I thought about doing that with you. And I was like, you did? And she was like, yeah. I was like, I had never heard of this until I started researching this. I didn't know they did fingerprinting of kids.
That's amazing.
And she was like, yeah, you know, I just thought like, oh, it would be so great. I was like, so like, what would the purpose of that be? Like, would that just be to like help identify my headless corpse or something? Or like...
Yikes.
She started laughing. She was like, well, no, I mean, I didn't really think about it like that. And I was like, well, so at what point is it going to help if a finger... She was like, well, you know, if you were really, really little and like they had you for a long time and then you couldn't remember where you were from or what your name was, which is legit, right? Because that's what happened to Steve Stainer, right? Like when they abducted him, the guy changed his name and told him his name was something else. He still remembered that his name was Steven, but he was only 7. So like if you're told all the time you're called this other name, you're young enough that it kind of reprograms your brain a little bit. Yeah. So I guess that was what she was thinking. But clearly, you know, moms were kind of freaked out too. Going to the milk cartons, in general, they were not effective, but there is no data. It's believed that they're not very effective. So if you remember earlier how I said that according to the FBI, half of all kids who are taken and murdered are killed within an hour after the abduction, et cetera, et cetera. So within the first 24 hours, 90% of kids are dead. So how well do you think a milk carton campaign is going to do at helping? Because by the time those images get to a milk carton, you know, And they also were not tracking those statistics. There's no way to really measure their success. There may be incidental stories that come out where like, oh, well, this was really helpful, or oh, this helped find my, but in general, and a lot of the kids who get listed on those milk cartons are runaways, just like most missing kids are runaways. I'm not saying that doesn't mean they're in danger. I'm just saying it's not a stranger danger. It's a different type of danger.
Yeah.
They were also very racially biased, so I don't know if you noticed, but the vast majority of the kids' pictures that you saw in any of the things were all white kids. So in 1997, while making up only 15% of the child population, Black children were 42% of all non-family abductions. So, and Hispanic children, too, were slightly more likely to be victimized in this way than average, making up 16% of the population. By contrast, white children at 65% of the population were 35% of non-family abductions. So even though more people of color's children were being abducted, they didn't get frequently put on milk cartons. They were emotionally distressing to see, like for families and kids, like every morning on the breakfast table, you see like this missing child. It's a little upsetting.
It's a great start to your day, isn't it?
It's super wonderful. And what people may not realize is that the dairy companies were motivated by tax breaks. So many of the companies got public service tax breaks by putting pictures of missing children on there. So they did it all the time just to get the extra tax breaks. And so I did read an interesting thing about teaching kids to fear all adults may not be super helpful. One example that was given in the Chicago Tribune from 1986 was a kid had fallen off his bike and a teacher was out walking his dog, and he tried to help him, but the kid was so terrified, he literally left his bike and ran away screaming.
Imagine somebody doing that.
Yeah. It's both sad and hilarious.
Yeah.
There were some really helpful things that came out of it, like the Amber Alert system is great. I think that's wonderful. It's a faster response with a very wide area notified. Missing children's database is really helpful to have, just because in the long shot chance that your kid gets found later. And then law enforcement in general, that's not just because of stranger danger, but law enforcement shares information between districts and agencies so much more now. And they have more data on what to do, and they're less likely to minimize missing kids. Because back in the 80s, if you were in a certain district or precinct or area or whatever, they did not share information with the people next door because they were super competitive. And they also didn't share with the FBI or any of the other agencies because they were like, I don't want to share this information, which hurts us, right? Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, but it did sort of terrify all of us, right?
Yeah, it did. It seemed to just generally create a panic, and I'm not sure that, I don't know. I feel like a lot of it was just done for the sake of it, and a lot of it was performative, like the milk cartons. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think a lot of it was kind of.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
That's sort of what runs through my head.
Yes.
For some of it, but yeah.
Yep.
But thinking about the other legacy of PSAs, as well as making us frightened of adults, they just terrified us in general. I think a lot of Gen Xers remember the clips that I showed, and quite a few others as well. Why were they so effective? This was something that the British Film Institute, when they were taking a look back at the history of the Central Office of Information in the UK, they looked at this, and there were several theories put forward. One of them was the medium, that they were always grainy 16mm films that were shown in schools, which built an anticipation, or they were shown repeatedly on TV at a time when the number of channels was fairly small and advertising daytime programming was limited. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm thinking also about Harris Brewis, H. Bomber Guy did a really great video essay about the effect of the videotape, the VHS aesthetic on horror films of the 80s, mm-hmm. and that actually when you see them being remastered in 4K, scanned from the camera negative, and you watch them again. It's kind of nice to see them again, but they don't seem to have the same terrifying effect because you can see everything and all the wires and all the seams around the latex and so on. So yeah, so there's something about the medium, the aesthetics of it, that's freaky. And also they have a dreamlike fairy tale nature.
Fairy tales.
Yeah. So a senior curator at the BFI, Patrick Russell, said, "They're Grimm's fairy tales. They appeal to those parts of the imagination that children let run free at a time when children's brains are developing very quickly."
Yes, that's true. That's a good point.
The form of them, they're not polished, they're not hyperactive, shiny things intending to appeal. They're bleak, they have long silences, they have a curiously spooky adult nature. Director Garth Jennings, who directed Son of Rambo and Sing 2, said, quote, "They also didn't try to appeal to children visually. They weren't made to look more groovy like a lot of modern animated safety commercials. They looked real and eerily adult, and they were strangely effective." And they also use similar techniques to low-budget horror and exploitation films of the time. So lots of point-of-view shots, expressive camera angles, the use of dummies and crude effects to show the results of danger, like Jimmy's legs bursting into flame. Jimmy! And because public information films fell outside of the censor, the British Board of Film Classification here in the UK, because they served an educational purpose, so there was that loophole, they could be more explicit than they would otherwise get away with. I mean, you would not be able to show somebody bursting into flames pre-Watershed on British TV. But, you know, hey, if it's all in the spirit of education, yeah, set Jimmy on fire. So, yeah. It escaped the Video Nasty clampdown. Now, there has been some suggestion that it wasn't meant to scare the kids, that it was actually meant to frighten the parents.
Well, does it matter what the intent was? Because it was all about the actual reaction, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I don't buy that. I remember being terrified by them. So I don't buy that. But some people have suggested on the sort of retrospective that we weren't literally as scarred by them as we like to pretend. We actually thought they were cool and wanted more gore. But I don't remember the age I was feeling that way. Maybe if I was a cynical teen when I saw them, but I didn't. I saw them when I was in single digits and they scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what you were just saying earlier. Like when you're a kid that's a certain age that is of the fairy tale age, when this stuff is being around you, your brain like perceives it differently, and you're not at a mocking age yet. You're at more of a, I have to take all this in and know it, because this is like, you're a kid. That's like your job, right? Is to learn information so you know how to act in the world. And this is this, along with, like, remember, this is all layered on top of all this other crap that we talk about. So like there's the nuclear nightmare stuff, and there's, you know, all of that is coming in all the time too. So you're just like, the world is dangerous and terrifying, and everyone wants to like do horrible things to your body. And you have to, like, for me as a girl child, like it was like everybody is going to constantly want to have sex with you. So you can't ever let anybody get near enough to touch you. You have to, you know, like, it's, be aware of everyone around you all the time, be terrified all the time, and that just leads to you like growing up being terrified all the time. Yeah, which I mean, maybe you could be, but
yeah, I feel like we're a little bit more hypervigilant and anxious than perhaps we needed to be, but
probably
we're still alive.
Yeah, so clearly my neuroticism is just keeping me alive. It's just working.
Yeah, it's working.
So, well, so I have a few, just to sort of wrap this up at the end. I have some stats and an interesting theory I want to share. So, first off, I pulled the U.S. violent crime stats from the FBI databases that are online. And this shows the violent crime rate per 100,000 people. So it's kind of weighted for the population as it continues to grow each year, from 1960 to 2019. So you can see this, regardless of the type, these are all just violent crimes. So things like burglaries and stuff like that are not captured here. It's just violent crimes. And you can see that you get to a really high peak in about 92, 93, and then it comes back down. And at this point, in general, we're about at the same point that we were in the early 70s or late 60s in terms of the rate, which
is strange because every time there's an election going on.
Yes, the crime.
Yeah.
And so this led me in my research of this to this theory, which I'd heard about before, but hadn't really read up on. So it's called the lead crime hypothesis. The major source of lead exposure during the 20th century was leaded gasoline. And proponents of the lead crime hypothesis argue that the removal of lead additives from motor oil and the consequent decline in children's lead exposure explains the fall in crime rates in the United States beginning in the 1990s. So I have a slide here that shows, and I'm going to make this full screen just so we can all see it really well. So this shows the violent crimes per 100,000 of the population, graphed next to the average preschool blood lead amounts. And they literally move the blood lead amounts over by 20 years just to let those kids who were in preschool become old enough to be committing crimes, right? Because obviously the preschoolers aren't going to be committing crimes yet. So you get it in preschool, you slide that graph over 20 years, and you've got the US, Britain, Canada, and Australia here. And the graphs just match up so perfectly with the years with like violent crimes, right? And so while this is not a proven hypothesis, like theory that everybody like totally knows, there's a lot of really, really interesting hard data that does support it. And there's an amazing video on YouTube that I highly recommend you go watch. It's called "The Man Who Accidentally Killed the Most People in History." If anybody has a chance, and you can pop the link into the chat, that would be great. It is "The Man Who Accidentally Killed the Most People in History." And it talks about, it's got tons of hard data with sources cited where they're talking about this lead crime hypothesis, and also just the way that they put lead and the guy who put lead into gasoline and the effects that it has on the brain and all of these things. Yeah. It's amazing. So yeah. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say I watched it because you shared it with me, and it's compelling, but they're very reasonable about it. They don't say, this is definitely it. They couch it as, this is possibly, there's a correlation here. It needs further analysis, but it's quite compelling. Yeah. And there's a very clear reason based on the damage that it does to the human brain as to why this sort of behavior might happen.
Sure.
Which makes me a bit sad because you look at Britain and it's still going up and up and up. So we need to make that shift to electric cars as quick as possible.
Yeah, you guys aren't doing great, are you?
Really are.
America is killing it. I mean, not in Flint, Michigan, but we are otherwise killing it.
Yeah. I mean, it explains the stabbings. If we had guns here, it would be a bloodbath. It really would.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know we're getting close to time. Quickly, I want to show this quick slide. So we've got, this is from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Programs. They put out this Juvenile Justice Bulletin, and it basically looks at some key trends when looking at 1997 data versus the 2011 data. Data older than 1997 just wasn't really captured very well. So unfortunately, we don't have very good quality statistics. It just wasn't captured. But it's really cool because it shows that, this is percentages. Okay. So we're looking at percentages of kidnappings by strangers. So these are just for situations where you've got like a stranger danger type of situation. 92% in 2011 were recovered and 8% were homicides. Whereas in 1997, 40% ended up being homicides with only 57% recovered.
Oh, wow. Okay. So hopefully that's because things like the Amber Alerts are working.
It is partially that. It's Amber Alerts, cell phones, technology, just the ability to get that stuff out there. So anyway, how do we feel? How are we feeling about things? Or do we think kids are better off not being allowed to go outside and play?
Well, I don't know. Are they even interested in going outside to play now? I mean,
good point,
the theory is that they just sit around TikToking with their head buried in their phones all the time. So
like us.
Yeah. Whereas, I was building dams and tunneling through mud mounds on building construction sites at great risk to my health. But maybe they're better off.
I was hanging out at the mini park telling all the other kids that the guy who lived behind me, whose swimming pool had a tarp over the top of it, the reason that tarp was there was because it was filled with the dead bodies of children who had gotten into his van.
Oh, wow.
I just made that shit up. I did. Whatever. It's fine.
Were you a popular kid?
I was a menace to society. All right, so I'm gonna read we have a couple of super chats and one other one that I want to read. So from Master Son 42, he says, my mom would tell me to stay close or I would get kidnapped. Same trip, 20 minutes later, after I worked her nerves, mom would walk off without me. When asked, she said nobody would want to kidnap you.
Oh no.
It sounds like something my mom would say if I made her mad enough. Thank you so much for the super chat, Master Son. Michael Hinkson, by the way, I have this right here. This is, you guys, this thing that Michael Hinkson gifted me with, we opened the box, I think it was yesterday. It's a JCPenney Christmas catalog from 1979, which is a very rare thing to have anyway. But it is, sorry, I have to fix this. It is so pristine. And from what I understand, and Michael, please feel free to jump in and correct me, but I think these hardbound ones like this were store copies. But apparently this store must have closed because no one has ever even opened this thing. It is, I don't know if you can see this, but these papers right here are like the little ads that you tear out in the front.
Yeah.
They are absolutely immaculate.
It looks like it was printed yesterday.
It does. It literally looks like it was printed yesterday.
I love the knitwear.
I mean, it's pretty great. I mean, this is just the coolest thing. I can't tell you how much I love it. So anyway, Michael Hinkson says Code Adam was created at Walmart because of the kidnapping of Adam Walsh, John Walsh's of America's Most Wanted fame son. Yeah, so we did, I think you came in later, but we did talk about Adam and John. And I've watched all the documentaries, and I was initially going to show a lot of clips of the parents, but it was just such a bummer that I decided not to do it. It is really interesting to see the activism of Reve and John Walsh. And yes, I do remember Code Adam. And that's actually really helpful. And in the hospital, when I used to work in the hospital as a nurse, every hospital has their own version of that for people stealing babies out of the nursery. So they have things called like Code Pink or Code Blanket or Code whatever that they call over and they basically, it locks and closes all the doors that exit any door in the whole hospital to confine somebody so they cannot leave. And anyone holding a baby, everyone's supposed to go outside and look for anyone holding a baby if a baby goes missing.
Wow. That sounds effective.
Yeah, but again, this is all stuff we didn't think about in the 80s. And then Wicked Person, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, I guess War Amps, I am Astar, a robot. I can put my arm back on. You can't play safe was a Canada-only thing. YouTube it. Join us in the after show, Wicked Person, because I will be showing that particular ad. Ooh. So thanks for stepping on it. And I'm just kidding. But no, I'm kidding. But yeah, so I will be showing that along with several others that I pulled that are just the most insane things I could find to completely freak out Conrad. Because that is my job. as an American. And I take it very seriously. So that does wrap up this episode of Dreamland. Like we said, we are having an after show. So for those of you on Patreon, you can join us over in the after show in about 15 minutes from when this show ends. This does wrap up our episode. You can find our show notes with all the links to all of our sources at retroblasting/Dreamland. retroblasting.com/Dreamland. We're going to be back next month. Well, actually later this month, right? July, towards the end of this month, with our next show. So Conrad, what is the watchword clue title word for next time?
Next time we will be talking about vision.
Vision. Like 2020 vision.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until then, you can follow me and Conrad on Retroblasting and Movie Oubliette, respectively, and on all social media outlets. And you can email us at thedreamlandpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.